It says, without love, she reacts without respect, and without respect, he reacts without love. Can we say that together? Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love. Again? One more time. And it gets, and then the motivation is the energizing cycle. His love motivates her respect motivates his love. Can we say that together? His love motivates her respect motivates his love. Again, his love motivates her respect motivates his love. As we point out, the key to motivating another person is meeting that person's deepest need. And one of the things that we want to look at tonight is this idea of love toward a woman which motivates her to respect. And then tomorrow morning, we'll look at how respect motivates his love. Now, the way in which the culture looks at this is his love motivates her love, and her love motivates his love. That's how the culture tends to interpret it. But Paul, and certainly Peter, are indicating something different. That the key to motivating a husband, for instance, is meeting his deepest need for respect, and that motivates him to be loving. And as we're going to point out, gentlemen, as you do these loving things that we'll explain in just a moment, it's going to motivate her to be respectful. And that's what's unique about this conference. Because the longing of many women is for their husbands to be more loving, and many women try to love on their husbands to motivate them to be more loving. Yet biblically, the way you motivate him to be more loving is by meeting his need to be respected. And one of the things that we have not rightly helped in marriages today is that men have been told if they love their wives, then their wives will be energized to be more loving. But women are already more loving. And they haven't been coached on translating their emotion into respect language or respect talk. So no one's talked about, okay, when the men love you, ladies, you need to translate that into respect language, and then use your respect language, which is going to motivate him to be loving. The culture just says, gentlemen, you ought to love, and then she's going to be more loving, and she's going to love on you even more, and when she loves on you even more, then you ought to be more loving. And that's the way the culture's been saying it. And what's happened is that our sons have come to a point as they move into marriage that they feel that there's something seriously wrong with them. Because what's taking place is that the women in the culture and in the church do not feel that men are normal. There is something wrong with men. It really is, that men are not as loving, and men need to change. And that's been the message. And we haven't pointed out that the reason that you as women are loving is that God put that in your heart. And you shouldn't pass judgment on your husband who's less natural at loving. That's why God commands him to be loving, because God didn't put it within his nature to be as loving as he made you to love. So you shouldn't take credit for who you are. And you should not pass judgment. Instead, you should just rejoice that God has made you that way, and then discover what it is that God has said for you to do. And when we do what he says there, then it will, I think, result in the kind of motivation that you're wanting your husband to experience. So we're going to unpack this because it's very powerful, and it's very practical, and it's doable. But I want to say to the men up front, we're going to spell love to a woman at this point. And when a man loves a woman, that should be a song. I think that should be. But I want to preface by saying some men in the church today feel ashamed for who they are. There is a feeling that there's something seriously wrong with them. And the reason I say that is partly what I just said. And I want to say to you men, look, it will never be natural for you to love like your wife loves. If that's the case, then the divine imperative in Ephesians 5:33 shouldn't be there. Why does God command you to do this? Because it's not natural for you. And so there's something that you're going to struggle with in a way that your wife won't struggle with. But what's happened today, some of you men have drawn the conclusion there must be something seriously wrong with me. And for instance, and you can see the bias against men. We tell men to get in tune with their effeminate side, right? We say that again and again. Or even men say, I'm getting in tune with my effeminate side. But we don't say to any woman, get in tune with your masculine side. Jesus said, have you not read who made them from the beginning, made them male and female? And 1 Corinthians 6:9 says effeminacy is a sin. God did not make you with a female nature, gentlemen, and that femaleness is not in you. Now, we're to imitate the virtues of the female, But we are not female. Just as you ladies are to imitate the virtues of men, act like men, be strong. That does apply to women. But the point is, you are not to get in tune with your masculine side. That's not who God made you as a woman. And this is not who God made you as a man. And some men have moved into tremendous shame because they've concluded that there must be something wrong, that I'm not sentimental like my wife. And we've taken sentimentality and we've escalated that as the criteria for normalcy. And that if the men do not cry, if the men don't tear up, if the men don't feel as emotional about cards and all this feminine sentimentality, that we've taken that as the definition of love. And then we've said to the men, there's something wrong if you don't respond like a woman. And I'm going to say to some of you men, tonight's the night that you must be healed, because you have been misled into thinking there's something wrong with you, and there isn't. And as a result, you've got yourself involved in things you shouldn't, because you've become so defeated. You've become addicted to certain areas because you feel so horrible by yourself. And I'm going to appeal to you like Paul did to Timothy. Oh, man of God. He called Timothy a man of God. And you are a man of God, and you must hear me tonight, because I'm going to challenge you to do what you do as a man of honor. Because you're a man of honor, you do the loving thing. But it will never be natural, and we'll explain that as we go through. But we must decode, here's what we're saying, that your wife is going to come across in ways that feel disrespectful to you and offensive to you and way too negative, but I'm taking the position that you need to decode that the deepest cry of her heart is that she feels unloved. She's feeling unloved. And you have to decode on the marital bus ride. Don't take up offense. She's not trying to, even though she knows it upsets you. It's not her deepest goal. She's a good-willed woman. And so you need to then ask yourself, wow, I felt disrespected today. I felt offended today. I just feel there's way too much negativity. But what you're saying, Emerson, I need to go back one step and ask, did I do something or say something that felt unloving to her? Because when she feels unloved, she reacts in ways that feel disrespectful. And because she's a good-willed woman, then you're saying logically, I must go back one step. Rather than just focusing on this behavior, which is offensive and disrespectful, you're saying that's really a defensive reaction that feels offensive to me, but in fact isn't. And I need to go back and ask, did I say or do something that felt unloving to her? And if you do that, and you're married to a good-willed woman, my prediction is, in most cases, you're going to find the answer that I'm going to unfold for you right now. But here's one man who wrote me, and I thought this very powerful. In fact, his wife wrote me to find out how to respect her husband, because she said there's a plethora of information on husbands loving their wives, but there isn't anything out there on women respecting their husbands, or at least knowing how to do that, what it looks like Monday through Sunday. And in the process of asking me for information, she said, my husband's in a small group with men, and they're talking about how to love their wives. So, I'm so grateful. And I said, whoa, that's exciting. Hey, have your husband write me and tell me what's going on. Why is he meeting with a group of men talking about how to love your wife? So here's the letter he wrote. He said, I had an epiphany experience about 18 months ago that totally changed my life and my view of marriage. Without sounding too mystical, I have to say that I believe God spoke to me then, and the message and insight I was given I cannot keep to myself. In 2001, on a Saturday evening, I threw a dish in anger that hit my wife in the face. She called the police, and I was handcuffed and taken off to jail. A magistrate thought it best for me to sit out the weekend there and held me over on a lot of bond. I wouldn't pay it, and so that set my schedule for the weekend. After about 4 hours on a steel cot in the middle of the night, the novelty wore off. And I really started to think hard about why I was there. With nothing to read, no place to go, and not able to sleep anymore, I basically paced and prayed for 2 days. One single scripture stayed in my mind the whole time. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. For 2 days, God replayed the memories I had of our arguments, and in each one I was acutely aware of how I had failed to love my wife. It was like pausing a video and having someone point to it and say, see, right here you could have reached out to her and reassured her, but you were too busy trying to prove your point. At one point, I was seeing her face all distorted with rage as she screamed at me, but totally without any sound. The mute button had been pushed on this memory. And then little by little, the sound came up so I could hear it, only the words were not what my wife had been screaming at me. Instead, they were replaced with other words, words that I needed to hear. I want you to love me. Why won't you love me? I'm afraid and insecure, and I need you to hold me and love me. And that's when I began to weep. All this time I've been so totally wrapped up in my own needs, to demand respect instead of being respectable, to be right at any cost, to win a petty argument. But this hurt our priceless relationship. I'd been so caught up in the words that I totally missed her heart, her need. This was my epiphany, and this is why Scripture commands me to love my wife as Christ loved the church. In my conversations with men since then, I've seen the color drain from their faces as I tell them about my experience. And I see the dawning of their own awareness as they realize how they have blown it too. We need this command, but not many of us know just how badly. Anyway, God sat me down for 2 days in jail, took away all the distractions, and forced me to look at myself in a way I'd never done before. By the end of it, I had been totally emotionally ruined and rebuilt. And I could hardly wait to get home and share with my wife what God had shown me. My last evening in my cell, I was freer than I'd ever been. I knew the Lord had spoken to me, and I knew I was going to do something about it. And then I love this line. I waited over a year from my experience to validate the changes in my life. Then this fall, with the blessing of my pastor, I began to invite other men to join me to discuss the topic. Decode. When your wife is coming at you screaming with rage, so to speak, decode. Is she trying to be disrespectful? Is she trying to be offensive? Is she trying to do all of this stuff? Not in the deepest recesses of her heart. She is trying to seek reassurance at some level, trying to bring about love in the relationship, even though that means won't achieve that end. At this point, what we want you to do is to be the mature one who decodes rather than telling her to stop it. You be the mature one that decodes. And a man of honor will make the move first and will decode, even in the face of what seems to be really outlandish behavior. And one of the points I'm making to you, as a man of honor, as a man God has designed, it will never be natural for you to turn toward your wife who's coming at you with rage and say something like this: I'm sorry for coming across as unloving. Will you forgive me? It is literally easier for us to die than to do that. It's true. Some of us would die for our wife if a burglar came in. Jesus said, no greater love is a man than this, that he lay down his life for his friend. Jesus defines love as self-sacrifice, and Jesus would look at most men here who are followers of him as loving. But of course, we label them as unloving because they're not sentimental. For instance, some forgot Valentine's Day, and there are women divorcing husbands over that because that has become the great symbol. It's true. This is the great symbol of love to a woman, and he didn't remember, and therefore he doesn't care, and you pass judgment on him, and women are divorcing over this. And I'll unpack to you why these things are not responded to like men. Why men forget anniversaries. Why do they forget birthdays? Partly because he didn't carry a baby. When you were little, you played wedding. You played all that. He didn't play tux. And as you had a baby, everybody talked about when is the due date? When is the due date? Giving birth. As a little girl, you thought about having a baby, giving birth. This whole thing is part of your psyche. Little girls run through the airports with dolls. It's part of your psyche. I haven't seen a little boy run through the airport with a doll yet. It's part of the psyche of the female. And as a result of that, you couldn't imagine. In the wedding day, you're playing wedding, thinking of the wedding day, the wedding. And guys, they're not processing. So there's a tendency for him not to focus in on that. And we'll explain to you in a moment. But the question is, does that define him as unloving? When the fact of the matter is, Jesus said he'd die for you, and I believe that he would. So your husband would die for you, but here's my deeper point that I'm making right now. It's easier for him to die for you than to turn toward you and say, I'm sorry for being unloving, as you come at him belligerently and with contempt, and say, will you forgive me? It's contrary to our nature. It's within our nature to die. But it's not in our nature to do that. And that's why I say, men, this will never be easy. It will never be easy because God didn't make it easy. That's why you're under divine command. But you do it not because you're to become a woman. You do it because you're a man of honor who has guts. And that's the way this needs to be framed. If we'd been challenging men to do the manly thing that would never be easy or nor natural, we'd be further down the line than we are right now. We have turned men off. We have turned men off. Now, how do you spell love to a woman? I'm going to give you fill in the blanks here. We'll give an overview. I'm going to tell you where we're going to go with this, and then we'll unpack this in even more specific ways to make it easy for you. But here's a husband's love. Fill in the blanks. When you want to be with her face to face. When you aren't secretly mad at her. When you empathize with her. When you resolve and reconcile with her. When you are completely committed to her. And when you treasure her above all else. So face to face, mad, empathize, resolve and reconcile, committed, treasure. Now, no man will do this perfectly. This is the target. This is the ideal. Proverbs 24:16 says, a righteous man falls 7 times, but arises again. You rise up again. You do it again. I love basketball because we don't think about it, but offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding is based on this premise. It exists because the game is not perfect. You don't come down and score 100% of the time. You don't come down 100% of the time and score. So rebounding is a huge part of the game, but it's created because the game is imperfect, and people are not going to make the shot. So offensive rebound and defensive rebounding is based on this assumption that you're going to make mistakes. And so too, in marriage, you're not going to do this perfectly, but you can rebound and you can come back and say, I'm sorry for having come across as unloving. And when you see the spirit of your spouse deflate, when you see your wife's spirit deflate, and then she reacts in ways that feel negative and disrespectful and offensive to you, I'm going to call upon you to figure out what it is that happened just before that, which you probably stepped on her air hose. Didn't intend to. You're looking for some place to eat your peanuts. And so I'm going to encourage you as a man of honor to go back rather than take up offense and figure out, and we're going to share with you how you can figure out one of these 6 things in almost nanoseconds. You can assess it really quickly. And then you're going to have to be at a crossroads. You say, well, I blew it. Well, it's over with. I'm not going to do anything. Or you can say, you know what? I'm never going to be perfect, but I can rebound now. I can rebound. I can come back and do something that I don't really like to do, don't want to do, never will be within my nature, but I do it because I'm a man of honor. Now, we're going to spell love this way, C-O-U-P-L-E, C-O-U-P-L-E, couple. I want you to think of a photograph of the two of you, and if that photograph gets ripped, your wife is going to do everything she can to tape it back together, to couple you back together. When it comes to emotions and intimacy in marriage, women are very intentional about connecting. The idea of connectivity is big. Women are energized by being one, by connecting. That is part and parcel of who they are. When they get into a career in the business arena, assertiveness training needs to be implemented because women need to be more assertive. In stranger groups, they tend to be more deferential. They allow themselves to be interrupted. There are many things that women, because of their sensitivity, are not as aggressive at times. So in that arena, they have to be encouraged to step forth a little bit more, but not when it comes to the home. Not when it comes to the home. When those doors close, most women are very aggressive to connect when that relationship feels ruptured to her. So that photograph is what I want you to think of, and I want you to think of C-O-U-P-L-E. And that acronym is going to help you remember these 6 points. And each letter represents one biblical idea. And again, let me just say up front, I've looked at every passage in the Old and New Testament dealing with marriage that I believe applies to the church. And I need to insert, we who get our academic training, we develop these secular systems of conflict resolution and all the stuff that we love in our systems. Then the church asks us to come and speak and do a Sunday school class. Oh, you want me to come speak to the Sunday school class? Yes. Oh, I better find some scripture to justify what I want to say. So we start what is in hermeneutics, the interpretation of scripture is called proof texting. You know what you want to say, now you go through the Bible and try to find justification for it. That is not the way you interpret Scripture. You start with the Scripture and work out from that. But because we've done this so pervasively, that's why no one is really taught the idea of unconditional respect toward the spirit of a man because he is a man. Why? Because we didn't start with Scripture. We started with our psychological frameworks. And there's much truth. All truth is God's truth. And there's great wisdom. And you reinforce the Scripture with our wonderful discoveries. But if we are truncated, we end up misleading people, and this is a deep concern that many of us have. So what I tried to do is look at every passage beginning with Scripture and then think of all the passages dealing with marriage, that is, and there's so much there that I could spend the rest of my life just unpacking that. I don't need the other stuff as such. Then you'll see me integrate what I think is the contemporary research that, lo and behold, reinforces some of this. Okay, the first letter, C, closeness of that acronym couple. Closeness, that face-to-face closeness. Listen to Genesis 2:24. Here's a salient passage. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. This is a very important verse. It's one of the first, dealing with the man and what he's to do in relationship to his wife. And that key word there, shall cleave, in the Hebrew is kind of like a permanent gluing. That's that face-to-face closeness. And what's interesting, do you know that only human beings, when they're sexually intimate, are face-to-face? All other creatures are not face-to-face. I hate to put that image in your mind, but that's... Why? God has set you apart. You are created in His image. He made us male and female in His image. You are unique. You are special. It's a powerful, powerful visual. And your wife has been designed by God to echo you. She awaits for you to leave your father and mother and come toward her and cleave, and it's a face-to-face cleaving. And God put it within her nature to respond to that. And she responds, though, eye to eye, face to face. It's within her nature to want to connect eye to eye, face to face. And listen to these passages in Scripture that portray her desire to be close. Genesis 29:34, my husband will become attached to me. Or Genesis 30:20, my husband will dwell with me. See that close proximity. Song of Solomon 3:4, when I found him whom my soul loves, I held on to him and would not let him go. Song of Solomon 2:6 and 8:3, it's the same refrain. Let his left hand be under my head and his right hand embrace me. Now, in the columns, there are scriptures at the very end which are exceptions to the rule, and you can figure out which are which. But like Proverbs 7:11, she is boisterous and rebellious. Her feet do not remain at home. Not all women want to be close to their husbands. So these are not dogmatic statements that it's always true for all women or always true for all men. Scripture itself does not teach that. But generally speaking, that's the case. In this instance, women who really love their husbands and want that relationship with him want that closeness. Listen to Deuteronomy 24:5. When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out with the army nor be charged with any duty. He shall be free at home 1 year and shall give happiness to his wife whom he has taken. And isn't that interesting? The Israelis said, young man, that first year you are to stay home with your wife and be free at home 1 year, bring her happiness, be with her close, walk hand in hand, be face to face. I mean, it's an incredible thing. Then at the end of that year, you go out to war and die. I want you to think of cappuccino cafes around America. At these cappuccino cafes, do you have long tables there that many people sit around, or do you have a whole bunch of little round tables? Which is it? Yeah. And around those little tables, do you have 3 men that have come in from the ranch, 6'4", 6'8", 6'2", all 300 pounds, sitting around those little tables, Harry saying to Joe, hey Joe, how are things on the ranch? Are we picking up the manure okay for you? Tell me, how do you feel about things? Tell me, here's your doily, here's some tea. Tell me your feelings. We both want to know your feelings. That's not happening. Guys aren't coming in from construction site. How do you feel about the concrete? It's just, it's not. But instead, you'll have 2, maybe 3 women seated around these little tables for an hour. Dr. Deborah Tannen, the great linguist, secular linguist, says that women will get together and share the report to build rapport. It's within their nature to share the report and build rapport with their intimate friends. And some of these reports have been going on for 30 years. You've raised your children together and just keep giving reports. Now it's up to grandchildren. You've been doing it for 35, 40 years. You'll do it every day. You give the report. You just have to give the report. You have to catch up. And you'll meet at places and you'll put your elbow on the table, hand underneath, and you'll talk for an hour. Go into these cappuccino places and just watch the women. Just watch them. God put that within her nature. She can't not do that. Every woman has at least one intimate friend. And if she doesn't, she's really a lost soul. She's been deeply wounded. This woman really is wounded and she knows who she is. Now, she thought she was going to be close to you, and if she doesn't want to be close to you, if she's the stonewaller, I'm going to tell you something very frankly here, men. It's not because she didn't want to be close to you, but she's afraid of you rejecting her feelings. You define yourself for her thinking that will bring explanation, but she sees it as defending yourself, justifying yourself, and blaming her, and you've shut her down. And some of you men, even who are more talkative than your wife, same thing. You talk about things that are of interest to you. You tend to be more intellectual, and you've got story after story after story. There's only one problem. You don't get in touch with what she's feeling, and she's just closed off. So the stonewalling woman is stonewalling not because she wants to, but because she's afraid of you. But most women who are in marriages are going to move toward the husband to connect and want to talk and want to share. Now, there's an interesting thing here, because there's a little bit of a male-female difference. Most men do not want to connect at that level in the same way. She has a need to do that in a way that many men don't. And the question is, can your wife have a need that you don't have, and is that okay? But back to this design that God has demonstrated in male and female, the whole nurture-nature thing is a huge debate, and they wanted to see what infant girls would do and an infant boy right out of the womb, basically. And so they put this little girl, newly born, and she was placed in a crib, and they wanted to see what she would do. They placed humans around the crib, and as she awakened and began to just become familiar with her environment, they wanted to see what she did in relationship to the human face. And as she awakened and her eyes opened and she began to look and focus and everything, and as that thing began to happen, they noticed that as she recognized the faces, she made contact with the human eyes almost 100% of the time. Something within her nature makes contact with the human face and eyes. God placed that within her. Then they wanted to see what a little boy would do. So he newly born in the crib, same kind of dynamic as he begins to awaken and looks and so on and so forth. They have the human faces there. And what did he do? He started looking at the human faces until he saw the ceiling fan. Not wrong, just when Joy was like 4 or 5, we were in Michigan, winter night, and I'd put her to bed, and she'd be laying there in bed, and I'd have a full day from the pastor, and I'd be kind of tired, and I'd just lay there, and she's just talking, little Miss Motormouth. Talk, 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 talk. And, it was so pitch black, the door's shut, the lights out, you can't see anything, and you couldn't see your hand in front. I mean, it literally is that dark in those Michigan nights, and she's talking, and then suddenly she says, "Daddy, look at me." And then her little hands just slap and bring me over, She literally pulled my face over toward her to look at her. Already at 4 years old, she was concluding that if I was not looking, I am not. See? The women are clapping. It's within your nature. As I point out, you can't not look at the level of intimacy. Watch women when they're sharing with one another. They're multitask, they do a lot of things, but the eye contact is incredible. They have to look. And I watched the other night, we were in Portland, we did a conference up there, and I went into the Starbucks thing, and I was just watching these 2 women over there, and for an hour, the one was really having a lot to say, and the other just fixated on her. And she was fixated. They just stared at one another, and she'd nod. I mean, this is within her nature. There was no exhaustion of that. It just, it was intense. I mean, it was exciting. Yeah, I just got tired watching. I just couldn't. Now, what's interesting, there's a male-female difference here. They've done some study on alpha males, and for instance, alpha male in a wolf pack, and the senior alpha male. And then you have these adolescent alpha males, and of course, sometimes there's a tension and a conflict between the senior alpha male and these up-and-coming alpha males. And that tension is real. But what happens when that conflict ensues and these underlings don't really want to take on the senior? What do? They literally almost get down on the ground, head on the ground, and just cower and look away. Why? It's a statement of honor. You look away because it's honorable. It's a statement, I don't want to fight, I don't want to take you on. God has put it within the male when there's tremendous tension to look away because it's the honorable thing to do. I mean, look at first grade. A little boy's playing kickball, and he kicks the ball, and he's coming around home, and he's running, trying to get there before they get him out, and a little girl walks in between him and home plate, and he knocks her over, just knocks her right on the ground. I know, because that's what happened to me. I can still remember the scene. Knocked this little girl right over. And the teacher grabbed me, and the whole scene. Now, what happens today in school is this. They say, Johnny, you tell her you're sorry. You go over here and look at her. You look at her. Johnny, look at her and tell Johnny, look at her.
Look at her and tell her you're sorry. I'll medicate you.
But if you let him say he's sorry the way God made him, say, Johnny, you're becoming a man of honor. I know you didn't mean to knock her over, but you need to apologize. Now you say to her, because you're a man of honor.